There are illustrious places where time slows, where the ocean speaks louder than traffic, and where wild landscapes still outnumber Wi-Fi signals. Scattered along America's vast coastlines are islands so beautiful, so mysterious, and so rarely seen that even lifelong locals don't know they exist. These aren't your spring break hotspots or glossy postcard getaways. These are the forgotten corners of the country, remote, rugged, and breathtakingly real. From emerald forests rising out of icy lakes to sun-bleached beaches hiding sea turtle nests, each island tells its own quiet story of survival, solitude, and wonder. Today, we're traveling to 5 of the most hidden islands in the United States, places that prove paradise doesn't need to be tropical, crowded, or even easy to find. So sit back, relax, and let's drift off the map together. And hey, if you enjoy discovering the world's forgotten places as much as I do, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow, and who knows, maybe one day we'll all need a backup plan when the mainland gets too loud. Imagine an island 45 miles long, reachable only by boat or seaplane, where moose outnumber people, and you're in the middle of the largest freshwater lake in America. Welcome to Ile Royale. It's one of the most isolated national parks in the United States, yet it feels alive in a way that's hard to describe. No highways, no bustling hotels, just endless boreal forest, misty coves, and the distant echo of loons calling across Lake Superior. If you ever wanted to see what the world looked like before concrete and car horns, this is it. Located off the northern coast of Michigan's Upper Peninsula, Ile Royale sits closer to Canada than to the US mainland, which explains why it often gets forgotten. Like the shy cousin at a family reunion who turns out to be secretly amazing once you actually talk to them. Despite being surrounded by the world's largest freshwater lake, it's technically an archipelago of more than 400 smaller islands, all sculpted by Ice Age glaciers. It's a place where you can kayak through narrow inlets that feel like veins running through the wilderness, or hike for days without meeting another human being. The park only opens from April through October because the rest of the year, the island is completely cut off by ice and storms. That isolation gives Ile Royale its strange magic. Fewer than 30,000 people visit annually. Compare that to Yellowstone, which sees over 4 million. The result is silence so deep, you can hear the wings of a raven slice through the air. But the real residents here aren't human. The island's biggest celebrities are its moose and wolves. For over a century, they've been locked in one of nature's most fascinating predator-prey relationships. Wolves first arrived by crossing an ice bridge from Canada in the 1940s, and since then, biologists have been studying how their numbers rise and fall with the moose population. It's basically the world's longest-running wilderness soap opera, complete with dramatic twists. At one point, the wolf population dwindled to just 2 aging individuals, threatening to end a 70-year natural experiment. So, wildlife experts airlifted new wolves in by helicopter, reintroducing genetic diversity and giving the drama a reboot. Of course, life on Ile Royale is not for the faint of heart. There are no restaurants, no Wi-Fi, and cell service is about as mythical as Bigfoot. The only traffic you'll encounter are moose wandering the trails like they own the place, which, honestly, they do. The island's terrain ranges from dense pine forest to rocky shorelines, all wrapped in that fresh pine needle scent that hits like therapy. Backpackers tackling the 40-mile Greenstone Ridge Trail cross the island from end to end, rewarded with panoramic views of Lake Superior that look like the edge of the earth. And if you're really lucky, you might even see the northern lights flicker over the water on a clear September night. Despite being wild, Ile Royale has history etched into every stone. The Ojibwa people once paddled here in birch bark canoes to mine copper thousands of years ago, long before European settlers arrived. You can still see traces of their mining pits along the trails. Later, fishermen and lighthouse keepers called the island home, battling fierce superior storms that could flip ships and swallow entire fleets. Shipwrecks still rest beneath its cold waters, preserved by the lake's frigid temperatures. Divers come from all over the world to explore them, floating through the ghostly remains of 19th century steamers now covered in moss and mystery. Today, Isle Royale is one of America's least visited national parks, yet one of its most beloved by those who know it. It's not a place you stumble into, it's one you commit to. Getting there requires planning, patience, and usually a ferry that feels like it's crawling across an ocean. But once you arrive, something changes. The noise of the mainland fades. Your phone becomes useless in the best possible way. Time stretches, slows, and finally stops. You start noticing the rustle of wind through cedar trees, the rhythm of waves against the shore, and that low, distant hum that only untouched wilderness can create. Isle Royale doesn't just make you feel small, it makes you feel right-sized. It reminds you that the world doesn't need us nearly as much as we need it. So, if you ever find yourself craving silence, adventure, or just a glimpse of what America used to be before the interstate era, look north. Way north to the middle of Lake Superior. Because hidden out there beyond the reach of modern life is a wild island quietly waiting to reset your soul. 10 minutes on a tiny ferry out of Bellingham drops you onto an island of artists, orcas from the shoreline, and breathtaking vistas. Meet Lummi Island. The ferry itself feels like a portal. One moment you're surrounded by traffic, coffee shops, and the hum of the mainland. The next, you're gliding over the calm waters of the Salish Sea toward a place that seems frozen in time. Only 9 square miles in size, Lummi feels like it exists in its own pocket of the Pacific Northwest. Too peaceful to be real, too beautiful to be ignored. Lummi Island is part of Washington's San Juan Archipelago, tucked just a few miles from the Canadian border. But unlike its busier cousins, Orcas, Lopez, or San Juan Island, Lummi has resisted the usual Pacific Northwest pattern of discovered paradise turned Instagram hotspot. With only around 1,000 year-round residents, it's a community built on quiet artistry and fierce preservation. The island's charm isn't curated, it's lived in. Narrow, winding roads trace the coastline, shaded by evergreens and glimpses of misty Mount Baker in the distance. On some mornings, fog hugs the island so tightly that the trees appear to float in midair. Despite its small size, Lummi's beauty feels impossibly vast. The beaches here are more rugged than tropical. Think driftwood, pebbles, and seaweed instead of umbrellas and margaritas. You won't find resorts or crowds, but you might see a bald eagle perched on a Douglas fir, or a family of orcas cutting through the gray-blue water just offshore. Locals say it's the kind of island where the soundtrack is wind and waves, punctuated by the occasional seagull screaming at nothing in particular. It's perfect for anyone who believes that peace and quiet aren't luxuries, they're necessities. Lummi also carries deep indigenous roots. The island lies within the traditional territory of the Lakhtamish, or Lummi Nation, one of the Coast Salish peoples who have lived in this region for thousands of years. Their connection to the Salish Sea runs deeper than geography. It's a spiritual relationship tied to the tides, salmon runs, and cedar forests. The very name Lummi honors that heritage, even as the island today hosts a mix of tribal members, artists, writers, and off-grid dreamers. Visitors often describe the energy here as grounding. Maybe it's the quiet. Maybe it's the constant reminder that you're standing on land that remembers. But don't let the stillness fool you. There's life pulsing everywhere. Local farms dot the island, offering fresh berries, honey, and produce at roadside stands that operate on the honor system. There's a single general store, an old-school inn, and a few cozy Airbnb cabins tucked among the trees. Until recently, Lummi was also home to one of the most acclaimed restaurants in the country, the Willows Inn, known for its hyper-local tasting menus that made foraged food sound glamorous. Though the restaurant closed in 2022, it left behind a legacy that helped shape the island's culinary identity. Simple, fresh, and born from the land and sea. Art thrives here too in ways both quiet and bold. The Lummi Island Artists Studio Tour draws visitors from around the region twice a year, opening private studios to the public. From sculptors and painters to glassblowers and potters, the creative spirit here feels like an extension of the landscape itself. Wild, subtle, and deeply personal. Even the island's fences seem to double as galleries, draped with sea-weathered buoys or handmade metal art. You get the feeling that everyone here makes something, even if it's just peace of mind. Hiking on Lummi is as meditative as it gets. The Baker Preserve Trail climbs nearly 1,000 feet to a viewpoint that stops you in your tracks. A sweeping panorama of the San Juan Islands, framed by Mount Baker's snow-capped peak and the Canadian Cascades beyond. On clear evenings, the sunset sets the entire horizon ablaze, washing the sea in streaks of gold and violet. Locals joke that the island has two speeds, slow and slower, but it's exactly that unhurried rhythm that makes Lummi feel like a retreat for the soul. What makes Lummi truly special, though, is how it resists change. There's no bridge connecting it to the mainland, no chain stores, no nightlife beyond a fire pit, and the sound of the tide. Even cell service fades in and out, as if the island itself decides when you're allowed to connect. Visitors often arrive for a weekend and end up extending their stay, hypnotized by the simplicity of it all. It's the kind of place that makes you forget to check the time, and then wonder why you ever cared about it in the first place. In a world that's constantly shouting for attention, Lummi Island whispers. It doesn't ask for likes or hashtags. It just exists, serene, resilient, and quietly magnificent. The kind of place that reminds you that sometimes the smallest islands hold the biggest sense of freedom. Seashells, salt marshes, and sea turtle tracks. Just a boat ride from Savannah lies Wassaw Island, one of the most untouched barrier islands on the eastern seaboard. The ride there is half the experience. Winding through glassy creeks lined with spartina grass, watching dolphins surface alongside your boat, and listening as the noise of the mainland fades into complete stillness. When you finally step onto Wassaw's pale, windswept beaches, it feels less like arriving somewhere new and more like traveling back in time, to a Georgia coast that existed before boardwalks, condos, or crowds. Wassaw Island is part of the U.S. National Wildlife Refuge System, protected since 1969 and carefully managed to keep it wild. It's about 7 miles long and less than a mile wide in most places, wrapped in golden dunes and tangled maritime forest. The air smells of salt and pine, and the only sounds are the chatter of gulls, the rustle of palmetto leaves, and the hush of waves rolling onto empty sand. No hotels, no roads, no ice cream stands, just nature in its purest form. It's the kind of place where footprints in the sand are gone by the next tide, and you realize quickly how temporary everything human really is. Though Wassaw feels untouched, it's far from lifeless. Every inch of the island is alive with motion. Crabs scuttling between shells, egrets fishing in the shallows, and ospreys circling overhead. It's a sanctuary for wildlife, both permanent and migratory. Each summer, loggerhead sea turtles crawl ashore to nest, burying their eggs under the dunes before slipping quietly back into the Atlantic. Volunteers from conservation groups come out at dawn to record nests, protect hatchlings, and watch as hundreds of tiny turtles make their frantic sprint toward the waves. It's one of those scenes that remind you how fragile and miraculous life really is. The island's ecosystem is a study in contrasts. The eastern side faces the ocean, broad beaches and shifting dunes sculpted by relentless wind. The western side melts into salt marsh, where fiddler crabs wave their claws like tiny conductors and herons stalk through the reeds. At low tide, the marsh glows golden under the sun. At high tide, it transforms into a shimmering inland sea. Hidden among the oak hammocks are freshwater ponds and small clearings where deer graze and wild hogs wander. It's nature's version of organized chaos. Everything seems wild and random, yet it all fits together perfectly. Wassaw's history is quieter than most coastal islands, but no less fascinating. Long before European settlers, the island was home to indigenous Gual people, who fished the tidal creeks and built shell middens, massive mounds of oyster shells that still peek through the sand today. In the 1800s, it became part of the wealthy Barnwell family's estate, and later the Parsons family of New York, who eventually donated much of the island to the federal government to ensure its protection. Unlike many barrier islands that succumbed to overdevelopment, Wassaw was spared by timing, philanthropy, and geography. And because of that, it remains one of the few places on the Atlantic coast where nature still calls the shots. For those lucky enough to visit, Wassaw offers an experience that feels equal parts adventure and meditation. You can kayak through the tidal creeks, where the water mirrors the sky so perfectly that it's hard to tell where one ends and the other begins. You can wander the beach for miles without seeing another person. Just the occasional horseshoe crab shell or the looping prints of a sandpiper. The sunsets here don't just color the sky. They seem to light the marsh itself on fire, turning the grass into waves of molten gold. And when night falls, the stars come alive, uncut by streetlights reflected in the still waters of the lagoons. But what really sets Wassaw apart isn't just what you see, it's what you don't. There are no souvenir shops, no fishing piers, no noise except for the sea. You can't drive here, and you can't casually wander in. Access is limited to small private boats or guided tours run by local conservationists. That limited access has preserved its fragile ecosystem for decades. Even the paths are soft, unpaved sand, shared between deer and the occasional hiker who knows to tread lightly. It's a reminder that not every beautiful place needs to be made convenient, that some are meant to be earned. Wassaw Island is the definition of understated beauty. It doesn't scream for attention, it whispers, and only those listening carefully ever hear it. In a state known for its manicured squares and grand plantations, this wild barrier island feels like Georgia's secret love letter to the coast, a place that doesn't need to be polished to be perfect. So if you ever find yourself near Savannah and crave a day that feels like it was borrowed from another century, take the boat out past the marshes, follow the calls of the herons, and step onto Wassaw's quiet shores. It's not just an island, it's what the world looks like when we leave it alone. Half a mile off the coast of St. Thomas lies Thatch Cay, a 230-acre private island escape with a history of copper mining, lobsters, and tire palm roofs. From the air, it looks like a green jewel adrift in turquoise water, a place so close you could practically swim to it, and yet so untouched it feels like it belongs to another era. Thatch Cay is one of those rare Caribbean islands that almost no one outside the Virgin Islands has ever heard of, despite being close enough to see from the St. Thomas Airport runway. It's an island that hides in plain sight, a whisper between waves where time seems to have paused sometime around 1850 and never hit play again. Thatch Cay has no permanent population, no paved roads, and no resorts. It's the kind of place that feels allergic to development. Even though it's privately owned, it remains largely wild, cloaked in dry tropical forest and steep cliffs that plunge straight into the sea. From a distance, it looks rugged and dramatic. Jagged limestone ridges topped with sea grapes, century plants, and cacti clinging stubbornly to the slopes. On calm days, the water around the island glows electric blue, clear enough to see coral heads and reef fish darting below. The western shore faces St. Thomas, but the eastern side opens straight into the Atlantic, where the sea darkens, the waves build, and pelicans dive like arrows through the spray. Despite its beauty, Thatch Cay's history has been anything but glamorous. In the 1700s and 1800s, Danish settlers mined the island for copper, leaving behind pits and shafts that nature has since reclaimed. The island's name likely comes from the tire palm, whose fronds were used to thatch the roofs of early Caribbean homes, or perhaps from a local family who once worked the land. Either way, Thatch Cay's story is stitched together from fragments: mining, fishing, forgotten farms, and the kind of isolation that drives away all but the most determined souls. By the early 1900s, the island had been all but abandoned, left to the seabirds and the wind. That solitude has turned Thatch Cay into an ecological refuge. Hawksbill and green sea turtles nest along its narrow beaches, while brown boobies and frigate birds soar overhead. The reefs that ring the island are some of the healthiest in the U.S. Virgin Islands, largely because no one's around to damage them. Divers who've explored its underwater slopes say it's like swimming through a living kaleidoscope, schools of tangs and parrotfish sweeping through coral gardens, the occasional nurse shark dozing in the sand. And above the waves, the island hums with smaller life. Lizards sunning on warm rocks, hermit crabs dragging stolen shells through the brush, and the faint buzz of bees in the tire palms that gave Thatch its name. In recent years, a few ambitious buyers have tried to turn Thatch Cay into something more commercial, plans for an eco-resort here, a luxury villa compound there, but every time the deals fall through. Maybe it's fate, maybe it's logistics, or maybe the island just doesn't want to be developed. The terrain is steep, water and electricity would have to be shipped in, and hurricanes regularly remind everyone who's really in charge out here. Whatever the reason, Thatch Cay has remained gloriously untouched, a blank page in a region where every other square inch has been written on. To get there, you have to charter a small boat from St. Thomas and time your approach carefully. There's no dock, so landings happen in the shallows, often with your shoes tied around your neck. Once ashore, the reward is absolute solitude. You can hike across the island in less than an hour, stopping to take in the panoramic view from its central ridge. On one side, the bustling harbors of St. Thomas. On the other, nothing but endless ocean and the faint outline of Tortola in the distance. It's a strange feeling, standing between civilization and wildness, hearing both the faint echo of city life and the crash of surf on rock. And then there's the light. As the sun sets, Thatch Cay becomes pure cinema. The cliffs glow red, the sea turns molten gold, and the shadows of passing frigate birds stretch across the sand like moving brushstrokes. When night falls, the island disappears into blackness, save for the moon glittering across the water and the soft crackle of waves hitting coral. There's no power, no noise, and no distraction. Just you, the wind, and a reminder that solitude can still exist in a world that's running out of it. Thatch Cay isn't the kind of place you visit by accident. It's a secret for those who crave silence, for people who measure luxury not by thread count, but by how many miles they can see without a single man-made light. Half a mile from one of the busiest cruise ship ports in the Caribbean, an entire island sits empty, waiting, stubbornly beautiful and defiantly wild. And that's the magic of it. Thatch Cay is proof that paradise doesn't need permission to exist. Way out at the tip of the Olympic Peninsula, Tatoosh Island guards the entrance to the Strait of Juan de Fuca and holds secrets of seabirds, shipwrecks, and ancient macaw campsites. From the mainland, it looks like a lonely rock rising out of gray water, constantly shrouded in mist. But up close, it's a world of its own, an island so raw and elemental that it feels like the edge of the continent's breath. Waves crash against its basalt cliffs with a rhythm that's been going on for thousands of years, and seabirds spiral overhead in chaotic flocks that seem to defy the wind itself. Tatoosh Island sits just off Cape Flattery, the northwesternmost point of the contiguous United States. It's small, barely 40 acres, but it commands one of the most dramatic views in the Pacific Northwest. To the south, forested sea stacks line the rugged Washington coast. To the north, across the strait, you can see Vancouver Island like a shadow on the horizon. Between them, the waters churn and twist in constant motion, where the Pacific Ocean meets the inland sea. It's a place where fog and light dance all day long, sometimes turning the island into a ghostly silhouette, sometimes flooding it with a clarity so sharp it almost hurts to look at. Long before any lighthouse or ship passed by, Tatoosh was home to the Maka people. For centuries, they used it as a seasonal camp, a place to fish, hunt sea lions, and gather bird eggs. The island's name itself comes from a Maka chief, Tatoosh, who led his people during the era of first European contact. To the Maka, this wasn't just a rock. It was part of a living, breathing relationship with the sea. Their canoes glided across these same turbulent waters long before maps gave the island a name. Archaeologists have found traces of ancient hearths and middens here, quiet evidence that this lonely outcrop was once filled with laughter, storytelling, and life. By the mid-1800s, Tatoosh Island became a landmark for sailors trying to navigate the dangerous entrance to the Strait of Juan de Fuca. The waters here are treacherous, strong currents, dense fog, and hidden reefs that have swallowed countless ships over the years. In 1857, the U.S. built the Cape Flattery Lighthouse on the island to guide vessels through the passage. Getting materials there was no small feat. Everything had to be hauled up sheer cliffs by rope and pulley, often in weather that made even seasoned sailors nervous. The lighthouse keepers who lived here led some of the loneliest lives imaginable. Supplies came only a few times a month, and storms could isolate them for weeks. Their closest neighbors were seabirds and the occasional seal that looked like it had something to say. When automation finally took over the lighthouse in the late 20th century, the human chapter of Tatoosh's story mostly ended. Today, the island is uninhabited and closed to the public, though it still serves a purpose. Researchers occasionally visit to monitor seabird colonies and study marine ecosystems. Because of its remoteness, Tatoosh has become a kind of outdoor laboratory, one of the best places in the world to study how climate change is reshaping coastal environments. Scientists have been tracking temperature shifts, ocean acidification, and bird populations here for decades. It's a reminder that even the smallest piece of land can hold answers to some of the planet's biggest questions. But science aside, the island's beauty is in its contradictions. It's harsh yet delicate, remote yet profoundly connected to the mainland's pulse. On stormy days, waves explode against the rocks with such force that spray reaches the lighthouse tower. On calm ones, the surrounding water turns mirror smooth, reflecting clouds that look close enough to touch. Puffins, cormorants, and morays nest along the cliffs in staggering numbers, filling the air with sound and motion. From Cape Flattery's lookout point, you can watch them wheel and dive while the Pacific heaves and sighs beneath them. It's a view that seems to belong to another world. What makes Tatoosh Island so captivating isn't just its isolation, it's its sense of endurance. It's watched everything change, from macaw canoes to steamships to container vessels, from oral traditions to global research studies. Yet the island itself remains stubbornly the same, windswept, salt-stung, and steadfast. The lighthouse still stands, weather-beaten but dignified, a sentinel that no longer needs to guide ships but still watches the sea as if out of habit. Few people will ever set foot on Tatoosh Island, but maybe that's the point. Some places aren't meant to be conquered or commodified. They're meant to be witnessed from a respectful distance through fog and salt spray, knowing that their wildness is the very thing that keeps them alive. And at the far edge of the American mainland, Tatoosh stands as a quiet reminder that not all borders are meant to be crossed. Some are meant to be marveled at. And there you have it. 5 of America's hidden islands, each one quietly existing far from the noise of the mainland. From the icy solitude of Isle Royale to the sun-drenched cliffs of Thatch Cay, these places remind us that wonder doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers through pine trees, hums beneath waves, or glows faintly in the last light of day. If you ever get the chance to visit any of them, go slowly. Leave your phone in your bag, listen to the wind, and let the silence do what it does best. Reset your perspective. Because in a world that's always connected, these islands are proof that disconnection can be the greatest luxury of all. Which one would you explore first? Let me know down in the comments. I'd love to hear which island called to you most. And if you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss an escape like this again. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time, somewhere off the map.